Hey there, Armando.
Good morning. Are you cold?
Am I cold? Yeah, a little bit. It's a little cool in here.
Uh-huh. You
Uh,
know, where's Maria from?
Mexico City.
Well, today is the Mexico Independence Day.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I know it's really not Cinco de Mayo.
No. Cinco de Mayo is the Battle of Puebla.
Is what?
The Battle of Puebla.
Puebla.
That's Cinco de Mayo.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, today is their Independence Day.
Yeah. So ask her to cook for you birria.
Okay. Well, I can ask her. She's in Mexico, right? She's in,
Not there.
yeah, she's in Mexico right now, so I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, all right. So she's there celebrating.
Yes, she is. She's actually in Mexico as we speak. She's been there for what, 3 days now? 4 days?
Mhm.
Yeah, she left on Saturday. So,
And are you behaving?
I'm doing the same thing I always do. You know, it doesn't ever change. You know. So I'm just doing what I'm doing. Anyway, all right. So we got about 11 of you here. Wow. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Good morning.
Great.
Thank you.
Very well.
Good. So we made it to Wednesday. And today we're going to be talking about generally about painting. And I've got a couple of things to share with you. But actually, I have a video that I want to share with you guys. It really doesn't have anything to do with painting, but I just thought it was like really interesting. Well, actually, two short videos. And then I have a longer one about probably everybody's very, very favorite period of art, and it's called the Baroque. Most people, they know the Renaissance, they know the Impressionist, they have no idea about what the Baroque was all about. And I found a guy online, he has a whole series of lectures and things, or videos about art history, and the channel is called Perspective. Okay, interesting guy. Anyway, I think he does probably one of the most interesting and best series of videos on art history, because he not only gives you the history of the painting and the provenance, but also he gives you a lot of insight into the personal lives and the relationships of the artists involved. And so, I want to share that with you as well. Now, it's going to run a little long. Okay, it's going to take us over our class time, but that's okay. I think it's well worth watching, and I would encourage you to hang in here for that. But I'm going to show you these first two things and see if we can get you to talking here this morning. Okay. The first one is this. And let me move it and expand it so that it's not this little tiny thing. I can't remember who sent this to me, but it's interesting.
Business Insider. Oh.
First seeing his work, I was mesmerized and blown away. I've never seen any artist work with paper as he did.
Notice the young lady in the back and what she's doing.
Looking at here is Michelangelo's David. He was initially inspired to do this piece because when he was younger, he was actually taught by his professors to look at these classical busts to initially start as a draftsman. So this is what he used, and these are his tools of study, hence the name of the show.
There are thousands of sheets of paper put together to form various figures. In the sculpture department at CAFA, the Central Copy and Fine,
That's really cool.
students are given these busts to copy as a project. So their busts that they're given in school. His take on it was to copy them in his unique method. Through years of work and trial and error, he's come up with all the works that you see currently on display in the gallery.
It's a relatively heavy piece, so it's like your core muscles and your biceps are really working.
Pretty much everything you see in the main gallery space has been sold. The most expensive piece in this room was the sculpture of David. It's an edition of two. They both sold for $32,500.
Any thoughts on that?
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Really, really cool.
Yeah, I thought those were like, it kind of blows you away. Do you guys have a good sense of how those were constructed?
Oh,
Carefully, very carefully.
Okay, so this is paper.
Honeycomb, like a honeycomb shape or something.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's kind of in a honeycomb pattern.
Mhm.
But what this is these are all individual sheets of paper that have been, glued or connected in some way into that kind of honeycomb pattern and stacked, right, on top of each other. And then, when they're all just stacked on top of each other, they create these three-dimensional sculptures. But when you stretch them or expand them, then you begin to see that what they really are is just sheets of paper. And so they're really not marble or anything else. They're just paper, And I thought that was really fascinating. And, I have no idea how long it would take, to put one of those together. I would imagine quite a while. And it would be quite a challenge as well, to, cut, each of those pieces of paper, so that they sit on top of each other and create the, contours that you see in the sculpture piece. So
Wouldn't that have been done after the paper was stuck together?
I don't know. I really don't know what his method is. They don't really explain, how he goes about doing that. But yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, in looking at kind of that honeycomb pattern, possibly they would put it, together and create a stack and then somehow cut, the contours away. But how they do that, I really couldn't begin to tell you.
Do we know the name of the artist that's doing it so we can look it up?
Yeah, I didn't get his name, like I said, somebody sent me this and I thought it was fascinating, but yeah, I'll do some research. I'll see if I can find his name for you.
I bet he used paper mache to make the faces.
Well, if it were paper mache, then it wouldn't be individual sheets.
Well, I'm talking about after it seems like they built the sheets up first. Like, I think it was John that was saying it. No, Robert. They built up these sheets and then looked like he put paper mache around the sheets. And then you're able to still cut into the sheets before it dries and to sculpt the face. That's the only thing I can think of, paper mache.
Okay.
Because it's lightweight.
Yeah.
Form of paper mache.
Yeah. I don't really know. I can't explain how he did it. But the effect is pretty amazing.
He must have liked Slinkies as a child.
Yeah, it kind of reminds you of that, doesn't it? Because
Mhm.
it does the same thing. It kind of this accordion sort of, fold. Okay. So I've got another thing to share, okay, and this will probably make most of you rather sad, to see, but yeah, I thought it was, again, a really interesting thing to, and it gets you thinking. Definitely gets you thinking about, if you're making art, how you're making art, and where that's all going, in the long run. Okay. Can everybody see that pretty clearly? Is that
Yes.
okay? Yeah, because I'm seeing a lot of other things in the background. Are you just seeing this, or are you seeing a lot of other stuff?
Just the image.
Oh, okay, good. All right. Yeah, this is a few minutes.
Is that real, or that machine is real?
Uh-huh.
So that's computerized, maybe.
Right.
Oh, yes.
But notice what it's doing. So, as you can see, it's gotten to the point now where, you can digitally print just about on any kind of surface now. And, if you go to a lot of like what they call promotional companies, people who make like gift items and things like that, for the last 10 years or so, they've been able to, print, on, directly on surfaces like T-shirts, cups, any kind of gift item, bags, things like that, in full color, with these digital printers. And as a fine artist, a lot of fine artists have been, reproducing their work rather than doing what we call traditional lithographs. Yes?
No.
Okay. Oh, Richard? You got to mute yourself, man. Okay. Anyway, they've been, reproducing their work to take to like various art shows and creating prints through this digital process called, giclée. And the difference between a digital print and a giclée print is that it's really just the ink. And the fact that the ink with a giclée is archival and is supposed to last up to 50 years, where a digital print may last 5 to 10 years before fading and, doing all the things that ink will do. But, as time has gone on, they've improved the technologies now and the color, the actual inks themselves, and made them much more archival, so that now you can have something printed and reasonably expect for it to last, for quite a while. So that's kind of where technology is going. And, the fun thing is a lot of these images were probably created digitally, totally. But some were probably also created in a traditional process where an illustrator or an artist sat down and they actually created a painted image, and then they had that scanned and then color corrected and retouched and things, and then they did the final print. And the advantage of working digitally like this is that you could do a original painting, that's rather small, but very clean, very tight, have it scanned and then enlarged, to put onto a wall or something like that. So you don't have to always work, in that, really large scale. And so a lot of artists are experimenting with things like that. And it's, it's another thing that you could look at, another thing that you could, play with in the visual arts, and that opens up possibilities for your work to be used in really a lot of different ways. Okay. Anybody got any questions about that?
What was that one in three-dimensional? Was that one three-dimensional? Because like
No.
the flowers came out sometimes, like the frame came out.
Yeah. It's the illusion that it's three-dimensional, and it's really not. It's all, flat on that surface.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, but that I found that kind of interesting as well, Bernice, that rather than just printing the artwork itself, they created these frames or borders that really gave you the illusion that, it was a three-dimensional frame, hanging on the wall.
Yeah.
What would be very interesting is to combine these 3D printers technology with the digital art type stuff, and then you could have a frame.
Yeah,
it could be a frame.
Yeah. Are all of you fairly familiar at this point with 3D printing?
I know what it is, but that's about it.
Yeah. I was wondering if the original sculpture was done on the first film. It was 3D printing.
Well, it could be. I mean, it could be a digital process, to cut, all of those.
Right.
pieces.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's very possible at this point, that could be done.
And as far as the images with the frames and that, if you have like screensavers on your TV now, they show, artwork with frames and things like that as a screensaver on the TVs.
Yeah. This gets kind of, it relates to this subject. There's a musician. Well, he's known as a musician, but he's really actually a visual artist as well. His name is Brian Eno. Is anybody familiar with him? It goes way, way, way back to like the 60s, okay? And Brian Eno, he went through art school, and he started playing music just kind of you know, on the side. He was kind of always interested, but he never really considered himself a musician. Well, he got together and he actually played with, you know, people like Jeff Beck and, you know, a lot of other, you know, well-known, you know, artists, you know, musical artists. But Eno was always kind of, you know, this visual artist guy. And he, you know, his idea of music was kind of like painting. And he created this whole genre of music called ambient music. Is anybody familiar with that? Okay. Well, he was one of the really early folks, you know, that started ambient music. But his thing was not just creating the music. It was also creating video and film that went along with the music. And his idea was that one day, rather than having paintings on your wall would be kind of like, you know, your TV monitor. And that in fact, you know, you could basically play a series of images on it, and you would have kind of this progressive, evolving painting on your wall all of the time. And obviously, you know, it wasn't just the image, it was also the sound to go with it. So yeah, he's an interesting character. And if you're not familiar with him, you can look him up. You know, he had some really, really interesting ideas. I think Brian Eno right now is probably in his 70s or 80s at this point. But he's been around for a while. And, you know, a really influential guy in both the visual arts as well as the musical arts as well. So anyhow.
Can you give me your the full name again of the musician, Brian? What?
Brian, yeah, Brian Eno, E-N-O.
E-N-O? Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he, yeah, his music is, you know, if you ever want to just sit and like chill out and like bring down your blood pressure, you can listen to a lot of his music. It's really designed just to be in the background and to be this thing that's kind of there, but, you know, not really distracting. So he makes some great music to paint by. And anyway, maybe I'll share some of that with you one day, because I really like his stuff. I've been listening to it for a very, very long time. Anyway, so on to the grand finale here. Okay, I'm gonna show this guy. Let's see, where is it? Yeah, right here. Okay. Okay, that's not the screen I want that I'm seeing. Ah, here it is. All right, and this guy is fun to listen to. And he's going to talk about Peter Paul Rubens.
Rubens is the nastiest, most vulgar painter that ever lived. His pictures always put me in mind of chamber pots. Thomas Eakins. My eye, Rubens's colouring is contemptible. His shadows are filthy brown, somewhat the colour of excrement. William Blake. What's this? He's gifted, but he's used his gifts to make nasty things. Picasso.
I don't care much about Picasso. Dude. Rubens.
The modern world really has it in for Rubens. It's as if everything he did jars with our sensibilities and goes against our grain. His religious pictures are completely over the top, aren't they? Too violent, too noisy, too Catholic. His mythologies are even worse. All those fleshy pink gods doing silly things in ridiculous mythological pantomimes. And as for his women, oh my God, Rubens's women. They're just too fat, aren't they? Women in art shouldn't carry this much cellulite. So that's what people think, but it's not what I think. I think Rubens was one of the most exciting painters the world has seen. Just look at all that invention, that energy, that drama. So yes, I'm a Rubens man. And in this film, I'm going to try and make all of you Rubens people too. I was never so disgusted in my life as with Rubens and his eternal wives. Lord Byron, eternal wives. Ah! When Lord Byron complains about Rubens's eternal wives, he's complaining about all those notoriously large women in Rubens's art. The modern world simply doesn't tolerate women like this, does it?
I do.
But why not? Seriously, why not? What's wrong with a few bulges and a bit of cellulite? Don't tell me nobody out there's got any. Even I've got a bit of cellulite. Besides, if you look back at the art of the past, the best evidence there is of the human worldview, if you go right back to the beginning, you'll see that Rubens's women are the norm, not the exception. This is the Willendorf Venus, the oldest known masterpiece of sculpture. Her task is to ensure human fertility. She's a bringer of life, a good luck charm. And look how fleshy and Rubensian she is. In any case, not all Rubens's women were like that. They weren't all fleshy housewives. Some of them were women of remarkable power and confidence. I mean, see all this. Everything in this room, this entire Rubensian outpouring, all of it is about one woman. That woman over there, the art-loving Queen of France, Marie de Medici. There she is, being born. As a Medici, she was born in Florence, and that's why there are all these cherubs down here popping out of the River Arno to welcome her. Here she is at school, being educated by the gods. Apollo is teaching her music. Hermes teaches languages. Over here, that's the French king, Henry IV, seeing her picture and liking it.
There is a huge fundraising deadline coming up for Senate Democrats, and they need your help right now if they're going to meet it.
I'm asking you to please donate now to help flip the Senate.
enough of that.
Henry liked it so much, he married her.
Whoa.
Don't worry, I'm not going to take you through all of it. There's still most of the room to go. 21 pictures in all, taking up a huge slab of the Louvre. But we're here for Rubens, not for Marie de Medici. And there's a big Rubensian truth I want to tackle here about the impact of his work.
You know, when you first come in here and you see all this, you're tempted to walk a bit faster, aren't you? To give most of this a miss. Don't worry, we all feel like that. I mean, all this is terrifying, right?
With Rubens, there's so much to look at, isn't there? Too much. His art sometimes forms an impenetrable blob of bodies that frighten you away. Here's a good example. Rubens' Fall of the Damned. It's just scary, isn't it? Have you ever seen so many bodies in one picture? Then, when you step closer and start giving it a good look, see what happens. The fleshy blobs start to disentangle themselves and make sense. The details emerge, and they're fascinating. Look at that. Ooh. And that. Ooh. And that. Ah.
The point is, Rubens always gave more than was asked of him. He was so inventive and daring, had so much fun painting his pictures. From a distance, that's not always obvious. From a distance, Rubens can seem frightening. But if you get closer to him, close enough to see what he's actually up to, Rubens is absolutely delightful.
And guess what? You have an ally in this exciting exploration. The camera. The camera loves Rubens. It gets you close enough to see his details, high enough to inspect his corners. Since this painting left Rubens' studio, no one's been able to see it as well as this. So yes, stick with me, stick with the camera, and let's plunge together into all that Rubens out there. Before we go an inch further into this film, we need to have a geography.
This is a famous map called the Leo Belgicus. And it was brought out in 1609 by a cartographer called Klaus Janszoon Visscher. And it shows Western Europe as it was in Rubens' time.
The lion shows the outline of what used to be called the Spanish Netherlands. Today, it's 3 different countries. Belgium around here, Holland up here, and over here, Luxembourg.
It was called the Spanish Netherlands because all these lands belonged then to the Spanish kings who inherited them from the Burgundians. And it was divided up into provinces, 17 of them.
These 17 provinces were split on religious lines. Up here were the Protestants, the Calvinists. Down here, in the Flemish bit, were the Catholics.
So this part and this part were at loggerheads. And in 1568, the simmering tension between the Calvinist North and the Catholic South erupted into a terrible war, one of the most brutal and longest wars in European history, called the 80 Years' War.
Now, Rubens was born in 1577, just after the fighting started. He died in 1640, a few years before it finished. So for his entire life, all 63 years of it, the North was fighting the South. The Catholics were fighting the Protestants. It's the only reality he ever knew.
You see, the world has changed. You don't need to sell at events and galleries anymore. You can go directly to your customer.
All that was happening around him all the time. And it's against that backcloth that his life and his art was enacted.
The conflict in the Netherlands stamped on everything. Not just history and maps, but entire families too.
Rubens's father, Jan Rubens, was a lawyer from Antwerp and, interestingly, a Protestant, a Calvinist. And when the 80 Years' War broke out in 1568, this Jan Rubens had to flee from Antwerp to escape an invading Spanish army that had turned up to enforce Catholicism and kill the Protestants.
He fled here to Germany, where there was plenty of work going for a Protestant lawyer.
Unfortunately, that's how he came into contact with this woman here, Anna of Saxony, the local princess, who employed him to sort out some financial matters.
Now, this Anna of Saxony was fascinating, but flawed. Very flawed. She liked to drink and she liked men. And as her new lover, she chose Jan Rubens.
Jan was also married. He'd brought his wife with him from Antwerp. But when a princess seduces you, all the rules get broke, don't they?
Their affair was short and grubby. Anna got pregnant, and Jan Rubens was quickly imprisoned for the very, very serious crime of adultery with a princess. He was in jail for 2 years, and when they finally let him out, he moved back in with the wife he'd betrayed and proceeded to have more children with her, including in 1577, the year Anna of Saxony died, a son called Peter Paul Rubens.
Now, Rubens's mother, Marie Pieperlinks, seems to have been a rather reluctant Calvinist. And when Jan Rubens also died in 1587, she took the family back to Antwerp, where they returned to a fully Catholic life, as if nothing had happened.
Rubens was 10 when he arrived in Antwerp. He was put in a Catholic school and then trained as a painter. His talent was obvious, and the new rulers of the Spanish Netherlands, the Habsburg Archdukes, Albert and Isabella, were quick to notice him and make him a favourite. But when you look at this early Adam and Eve, painted soon after he finished his apprenticeship, worth remembering that the sin of lust was embedded in his childhood, that religion and its conflicts had stamped on his history, and that his betrayed mother was the only religious constant he really knew. Why did Rubens paint so many Madonnas and children? And why are they all so soppy? I think it's because they're personal. Very personal.
The Rubens family house was up here in St. Michaelsstraat. Just around the corner, meanwhile, in Kloosterstraat, lived the family of Jan Brandt, an Antwerp lawyer who had a vivacious daughter called Isabella Brandt.
Isabella was charming, sparky, fun to be with, and hard-working. She liked to roll up her sleeves and get things done, which is what Rubens liked to do too.
She lived so close to him they could hardly fail to meet, and soon enough they were courting. Not long after, in 1609, they got married.
Rubens was 32 when he married Isabella. She was 18, but that was normal at the time. They moved into this big house here, the Rubens house. And as he was to do with all the people in his life, Rubens began putting Isabella into his art. Sometimes he did it officially, as in their touching wedding picture in the Alte Pinakothek in Munich. Rubens and his... Isabella sitting in a honeysuckle bower, all loved up and content. Other times, Isabella is lightly disguised. Here she is pretending to be the Virgin Mary looking after the baby Jesus. And I'm pretty sure Jesus is actually their first son, Albert, born in 1614. And if I'm not wrong, and I don't think I am, isn't this her as well, gone blonde for a moment, and popping up so cheekily as a jolly follower of Bacchus in one of Rubens's fleshiest mythologies, the drunken Silenius. They were married for 18 years, until her early death in 1626. And in that time, God only knows how many Isabella Brandts popped up surreptitiously in her husband's art.
In front of Rubens, put on blinkers like those a horse wears. Jean-Auguste Dominic Ingres wrote that. Horse blinkers. Ah!
You don't need blinkers to look at Rubens. What you need is a bigger telly.
Is there anyone called Chris watching this film? Like Chris Froome, the cyclist, or Chris Martin, the pop singer? Well, if you are watching, all you Chris's out there, this bit of the film is dedicated to you.
Chris's of the world, how often do you consider the true significance of your name? What does Christopher really mean? And what's it got to do with this stupendous Rubens masterpiece, The Descent from the Cross, in Antwerp Cathedral. You have to follow me round here. See that huge fellow up there on the back of the side wings? That is Saint Christopher, and he's carrying Christ across the river. Because Christopher, of course, means carrier of Christ. Now, St. Christopher was the patron saint of an organization called the Arquebusiers Guild. The arquebusiers used these things. Arquebuses, a big new gun that revolutionized warfare in the 80 Years' War. Here in the Spanish Netherlands, with their endless wars, the arquebus was constantly in use. And in Antwerp, the arquebusiers had formed their own militia, a kind of territorial army, whose task was to defend the city. And the president of this arquebusiers guild was a man called Nicholas Rocox. That's him on the left, standing behind the old man. In 1611, Rocox and the arquebusiers commissioned Rubens to paint a new altarpiece for Antwerp Cathedral. It's his most famous painting, and probably his greatest. But to get back to all you Christophers out there, this idea of carrying Christ is what unites all the bits of this dramatic and magnificent altarpiece. So in the middle, the dead body of Christ is being carried from the cross. He suffered his terrible crucifixion, and now it's time to bury him. You can really feel the weight of his corpse, can't you, as all these helpers and apostles lower him down from the cross. But it's these women at the foot of the cross towards whom it all seems to be slumping. On the left, at the bottom, Mary of Cleophas, so youthfully beautiful, sheds a desperate tear. Next to her, Mary Magdalene, the reformed prostitute, lets Jesus' rest on her shoulder and makes him suddenly appear weightless. So everyone here is carrying Christ, and that's what this central panel is about. But over here on the left, Rubens winds back the clock to the time before Jesus is born, to the so-called visitation. And there's the Blessed Mary again, the rather unlikely blonde with the red top. And as you can see, she's heavily pregnant. She's come to visit her cousin, Elizabeth. And she's carrying Jesus in her womb. These days, the picture's always open, but in Rubens's time, it was often closed. Like that. With St. Christopher over here and the old hermit on the other side. And then, when they opened it, all this was revealed. It's like 17th century cinema, isn't it? Dramatic, emotional, vivid. And all you Christophers out there, I want to thank for this.
Nicholas Rocox, the president of the arquebusiers, who commissioned Rubens's great Descent from the Cross, lived in this house here. Rocox was the mayor of Antwerp several times, a very powerful and influential man, a good man for Rubens to have on his side. And that's him there, up on the left of this devotional triptych that Rubens painted for him. And his wife, she's on the other side. Lucky old Rocox had Rubens's all round the house. But the one I want to focus on now used to hang here above the fireplace where that Rubens Venus is now. And in Rocox's time, this position here was occupied by a very naughty picture. A picture which calls for some music. The story of Samson and Delilah is told in the book of Judges. She was a woman from the valley of Sorek. He was an Israelite, famed for his great strength. The Philistines, traditional enemies of the Israelites, promised Delilah money, 1,100 pieces of silver, to find out the secret of Samson's strength. At first, he resisted her. But after a night of intense biblical lovemaking, Samson could resist no more. So Delilah finds out that the secret of Samson's strength is his long hair. And in the Rubens painting, the Philistines have just arrived at the door, and they've brought a barber with them. It's such an exciting picture. Rubens doesn't just bring the Bible to life, he sets it on fire. And when you look at Samson, exhausted by all that sweaty sex, just lying there, poleaxed, like a goalkeeper who's banged his head against the post. So Nicholas Rocox commissions Rubens to paint a big warning about the seductive power of women, and to put it above the mantelpiece here where no one can miss it. What does Rubens do? Well, Rubens paints him one of the sexiest pictures in the whole of Baroque art, an utterly tangible depiction of post-coital exhaustion. And if you look around Rubens's art of these busy years, you'll find lots of Delilahs scattered about his crowd scenes, tempting the Samsons. All these beautiful blondes don't just look like Delilah, they are Delilah. The same blonde model popping in and out of Rubens's art, like a Baroque Barbara Windsor in a carry-on. Sometimes, as in this particularly violent depiction of the massacre of the innocents, she's even wearing the same dress. Other times, she's not. So, how does Rubens do it? How does he make his art?
And I'm sure that most of you notice when you go to fill up your tank of gas in your car, oftentimes it's below.
So vivid. To find out, I've wangled my way into a top secret Antwerp warehouse.
where a team of busy restorers is working on a Rubens Madonna. It's painted, as most of his best work was painted, not on canvas, but on wood.
Antwerp, in fact, the Antwerp School of Painting is one of the few schools that is still painting on wood in the early 17th century. The tradition of painting on wood in Flanders had a long tradition, of course, since the times of Van Eyck and Bruegel. And on the smooth panels, every brush stroke is visible and remains visible. And so also the difference between these brush strokes, so very smooth glazing areas, but also the very upstanding, very three-dimensional highlights.
That's a difference that I always notice with Rubens. The surfaces look very kind of liquid almost, as if they haven't quite solidified. There's that brilliant sort of skating feeling across the painting.
Absolutely. Rubens really loved to paint on a smooth surface. Also on panel, you could paint very differently. So his painting on panel became more, let's say, atmospheric.
Now let's talk about this wood. Where did it come from? I mean, I think I read somewhere that a lot of it came from my country, from Poland.
Well, it comes exactly from Poland and the Baltic region. It was, let's say, shipped towards Antwerp. And then when it arrived, it was, of course, cut into planks, and then panels were made. And these panels had standard shapes, they had standard formats.
When you look at Rubens, though, quite often you see the lines, don't you? You can still see the lines where the panels were. So it wasn't made from one panel, it was made from separate pieces.
That has to do with the fact that Rubens, when he developed his ideas, was one of the first painters that didn't take the format for granted. So while he's thinking about his composition, he often enlarges it. And a good example for us is the Madonna with a Parrot, which started as a smaller Madonna picture and then completely overworked, completely overpainted. And so it became this very Baroque, very Italianate, large piece.
Maybe we can have a closer look as well.
Absolutely. So the painting was started by Rubens in 1614. And the painting was, in fact, was a standing format from approximately here to there, and high as such.
So just a Madonna and Child?
A Madonna and Child, without a Parrot, without St. Joseph, so only the Madonna. Then the painting was still in his studio. He didn't sell it, apparently. And then in 1630, he turned it into something which is far grander, far more monumental, so more an Italianate, Venetian painting.
That's so interesting, though. So, can I ask, though, why would he bother doing that? I mean, you've got a picture here, which, you know, by Rubens' standards is quite modest. Why didn't he just start from scratch? Why would he begin to enlarge it like this?
Never waste something that exists and transform it into your idiom of the moment. I think he wanted to get rid of an older Madonna he couldn't sell, or he didn't sell, and
makes it a much more glorious painting.
Absolutely.
Tell you what I really like here, this red.
Absolutely.
Well, Rubens is red.
Absolutely.
It's like a lipstick on a woman's lips.
That's his color. That's his color. His balance of colors is always turning to the reds. The reds are his.
One of the big criticisms that's always levelled at Rubens is that he churned out too many pictures. His studio was the biggest and busiest in Europe, so there are a lot of Rubenses out there. Too many for one man to have painted. So the worry is his assistants did it all for him. It's true, he was amazingly prolific. And to achieve all that Rubens achieved did require the assistance of a busy studio. But why is that so terrible? We don't expect an architect to lay all his own bricks, or a composer to play all the instruments. So why in art are we so reluctant to admire a collaborative effort? Now this little picture is by Rubens and by Jan Bruegel. So is this one and this one. They're so petite. Look, 5 exciting little pictures, packed, rammed with so much stuff. They're actually allegories of the senses, 5 of them. Each picture a different sense. This one here, with all the flowers, that's the sense of smell. The one with the telescope in it and all the magnifying gizmos, that's sight. And this one, my favourite, with Venus playing a lute and Cupid singing, that's hearing. The actual music that Venus and Cupid are playing in the picture and that you're listening to now is a madrigal by the 16th century English composer Peter Phillips. And all those notes on the table, those are the actual notes. The musical instruments are perfectly identifiable too. The birds are all birds that are famous for talking. The caws, the cockatoo, and under the keyboard, a cheeky toucan. To work out all the symbolism packed into these 5 paintings would take several hours. So my advice to you is to come back here to the Prado one day and to spend the whole day in front of Bruegel and Rubens. You'll really enjoy it. But why is Rubens working with Bruegel? Who did what in these exciting allegories? And why? Bruegel was renowned as a still life painter, and he specialised in these busy allegories. He was actually taught to paint miniatures by his grandmother, and some of the detail in this picture is so fine that he had to paint it with a brush that only had 1 hair. So most of what you see here was painted by Bruegel, who'd lay out the picture and pack it with details. But he'd leave empty spaces for Venus and Cupid. And the picture was then taken round the corner to Rubens's studio, and Rubens would put in the figures. What an extraordinary way to make pictures. The question is, why bother? It certainly wasn't because Bruegel couldn't do the figures himself. In his own art, like this bustling country road in Brabant, Bruegel was perfectly capable of doing all sorts of figures. Bruegel didn't collaborate with Rubens because he couldn't do figures. Bruegel collaborated with Rubens, his friend and neighbour, because their joint achievement was more valuable than an individual achievement. Bruegel pulled Rubens in a different direction. Their shared accomplishment was something more than a solo accomplishment. And is collaboration really such a bad thing? when it gives us art as good as this. No more Blake. You must agree that Rubens was a fool, and yet you make him master of your school. Rubens, a fool. He just doesn't get it, does he? Just doesn't get it. Rubens was anything but a fool. If he'd never been a painter, he'd still have been an important figure in another crucial field of European history: politics. Rubens was the most politically active and powerful artist there's ever been. He was the Henry Kissinger of his times. To have achieved what he did in politics while keeping down his day job as Europe's greatest painter was remarkable. To give you a sense of the twisted political realities of Rubens's world, here's his head of Medusa, painted in 1617. See Medusa's hair, how knotted and slimy and slippery it is. Well, the politics of Rubens's world were like that. To understand what was going on in Rubens's day between Spain, France, England, the Spanish Netherlands, and the breakaway Dutch provinces, you don't just need a degree in history, you need to be pretty good at geometry too, and biology. It's very complicated. Isabella, the ruler of the Spanish Netherlands, was married to her cousin, Albert. So they were both Habsburgs, and together they ruled the Spanish Netherlands. And this Habsburg connection was crucial, because Isabella was also the daughter of Philip II, the Habsburg King of Spain, who, you may remember, was King of England too, when he briefly married Queen Mary, the daughter of Henry VIII. Now, Philip's dream was to restore Catholicism to England. That's why he sent over the Spanish Armada to conquer England. However, back in the Spanish Netherlands, Philip's daughter, Isabella, didn't want war with England. She wanted peace, because Isabella's dream was to restore a united Netherlands. And that's also what Rubens wanted. 1621, Albert, Isabella's husband and cousin, died. And that left Isabella the sole ruler of the Spanish Netherlands. And so heartbroken was she by Albert's death that she retired from courtly life and became a nun, a poor Clare, as they were called. From now on, she ran the country from a monastery with the help of her closest political advisor, her court painter, Rubens. As the greatest artist in Europe, Rubens was welcomed at every court. Everyone wanted to be painted by him. And while he was painting them, well, there was lots of time, wasn't there, to discuss a bit of politics, share some confidences, make a couple of suggestions. Back at the 80 Years' War, Isabella, hoping to achieve peace, needed Spain to ally herself with her historic enemy, England. So she sent her best diplomat, Rubens, to Spain
His task was to persuade the new Spanish king, Philip IV, who was Isabella's nephew, to enter into a new alliance with Charles I and England. And that's why, in 1629, having smooth-talked Philip IV round to Isabella's way of thinking, Rubens arrived in London and set about charming Charles I as well. This was actually painted by Rubens's greatest pupil, Van Dyck. It still hangs in Buckingham Palace today. How do you get a king to eat out of your hand? You put him on a big white horse and give him the bearing of a mighty warrior. It's what's called the Rubens way. And it didn't stop there. To ingratiate himself further with Charles I, Rubens offered to paint the ceiling of this famous building here, Inigo Jones's banqueting house in Whitehall. It's the only great painted ceiling by Rubens that's still in situ in the place for which it was painted. All this art, all this effort and time and invention lavished on England in the pursuit of peace. You know what? It worked.
Whoops, sorry. Didn't need that.
All this cunning artistic diplomacy by Rubens worked. To thank Rubens for his diplomatic services, Charles knighted him and also gave him a diamond-studded hat band for his hat. For Rubens, though, enough was enough. He was a painter, not a diplomat. Having successfully engineered a peace between Britain and Spain, the Henry Kissinger of the Baroque returned to Antwerp and gave up politics forever. From now on, Rubens's attention was claimed fully by his day job and by the other great love of his life, women. Isabella Brandt had died of the plague in 1626, and a lonely Rubens needed to find a new wife. The one he found, Hélène Formand, would become one of the most painted women in art. Hélène Formand was 16 when she married Rubens, and he was 53. Now, in those days, it was less of an issue, but it was still unexpected. Rubens's friends thought he'd choose a countess, or maybe a duchess. That's how high he'd climbed up the social ladder. Instead, he chose the daughter of a tapestry salesman. Homely, unpretentious, and beautiful, in a full-bodied Flemish way. Rubens was always a very sensual painter, very physical, unusually physical. And his art often makes very clear how much he enjoyed the pleasurable side of marriage. Hélène Formand begins to appear and reappear in his pictures with remarkable frequency. Sometimes she's a country girl, sometimes a goddess. Sometimes She's all over the place and pops up throughout the picture. And sometimes she's entirely undisguised. Rubens' wife, mother of his children, the woman he loves. This is the most notorious of his depictions of her, Hélène Formant in a fur coat. It's notorious because, well, you can see why, can't you? It's not every day that a great painter shows us his wife like this. She's just had a bath, and as she steps towards us, she's grabbed a handy bit of fur and wrapped it round herself to cover herself up. But the fur's not doing very well, is it? There's more of Hélène Formant poking out than poking in. It's actually another clever bit of role-playing. She's meant to be Venus, the goddess of love, the most famous woman ever to step out of the sea naked and wet. And it's Venus in a particular guise, what they call Venus pudica, the shy Venus. It's the same Venus that Botticelli painted in his most famous picture, coming out of the sea, covering herself up so shyly. But look how vividly Rubens updates her shyness. How real he makes it. There's an awkwardness to her, isn't there? As there would be if you had to stand about like that. But the fur coat, that's a brilliant touch, which plucks her out of the clouds and brings her right back down to earth in Antwerp in the 1630s. I love her dimply knees and that soft tummy of hers. That's not the tummy of a goddess. That's the tummy of a real woman. Rubens has cast his wife as the Venus of Antwerp, but he's also worshipping her evident humanity. A happy man in a happy marriage is making clear in his art how he feels about the woman he loves. Isn't that marvelous?
Marvelous.
I think we need a summary to count up all the things that Rubens achieved. 1, he painted some of the most exciting and dramatic religious art of the Baroque era. 2, he painted some very entertaining mythologies and broke world records for filling his pictures with cheeky cherubs and fleshy nudes. 3, he was a great portraitist. His portraits are so vivid and compelling, particularly his portraits of his wives. How touching they are. 4, size-wise, his scale is unchallenged. No one painted art as big and as ambitious as Rubens's art. Which takes me straight to number 5, which is how madly inventive he was. Everywhere you look in Rubens, something remarkable is going on. 6, technically, he was as good as any painter has ever been.
My mom didn't know she was going to die.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
Okay.
Wizard of the paintbrush who made the paint sing and the colours dance. 7, he collaborated with some of the best artists of his time, and the results of this exciting pictorial democracy are glorious. 8, and this is something I haven't even had time to deal with yet, but believe it or not, Rubens designed wonderful tapestries. And at the convent of the Poor Clares in Madrid, you get a really good sense of how big and spectacular his tapestries were. 9, and I haven't been able to fit this in either, he was an architect. And the Church of the Jesuits in Antwerp, with that superb facade, that was Rubens's handiwork too. So here's a man who could achieve all that. Surely he couldn't do any more. Well, actually, he could, because Rubens was also a great landscape painter. And that is number 10. When Rubens married Hélène Formant, they moved out here to the Chateau d'Estaing, the great country house they shared so happily, where Rubens's art put on its wellies and began filling its lungs with fresh country air. This part of Flanders around the Chateau d'Estaing is called Brabant, and this was his inspiration. Oh look, some goldfinches. Oh look, a kingfisher. In his revolutionary landscapes, Rubens's brush explores the Brabant countryside like a happy dog. No one had painted landscapes as fresh and airy as these before. And look how big they are, and how far away the horizon seems in these endless panoramas. He did night scenes too. There's a particularly beautiful one at the Courtauld Galleries in London. The evening sky twinkling with dreamy stars, and such a gorgeous atmosphere of romance. Rubens at his soppiest, melting the hardest heart. But he could do storms too. They're some of the fiercest in art. You wouldn't want to be out in a Rubens storm. Rubens's views from his window celebrate nature's many moods. Having reinvented everything else, Rubens, as his final contribution, reinvents the landscape too. That's the kind of man we're dealing with here.
There you go. So now you know a little bit about Peter Paul Rubens. Okay?
Very interesting.
Yeah, anybody got any thoughts or comments about him, his work, things like that?
He sure painted a lot.
Yeah, he painted a lot in the size. The scale of his work is just unbelievable.
I never realized he did landscape, so they were fantastic.
Yeah, he mainly did landscape toward the end of his life. Before that, it was mainly, religious and mythology type paintings, and portraits. But then, yeah, he moved into landscape. Once he had sort of retired, from the court and from political life. Yeah, so that gave him, a little more time to go out and paint landscapes. But he his later work, his landscape work in particular, was very influential, and particularly on the English artists, that came after him. And, you know, because, you know, he took landscape, which had been really sort of an Italian thing up until then. And then really kind of, you know, people seeing his work and what he could do with it, particularly the English, took it on and really made it a genre all into itself. You know, during the Renaissance, all the way up, you know, through really the beginning of the Baroque, landscape was not really, you know, a genre unto itself. It was just used, like people like Leonardo da Vinci, you know, as a backdrop, you know, to put his figures against and, you know, as part of a story. But, you know, Rubens really took it and made it, you know, just a beautiful thing all to itself. And then painters began to do just landscape. And we'll talk about those a little bit later as we get into some of the English artists and then later the American artists like the Hudson River School and, you know, the California colorists and things like that. But, you know, he's influenced, you know, other art movements, you know, significantly in so many different ways. And yet, you know, a lot of people don't really talk about his work and or really give him a lot of the credit that he really deserves. But he was an amazing person, not only as an artist, but, you know, just, I mean, he did a lot, you know, by any standard. Anybody got anything?
Now, Baroque was before or after Renaissance?
It was after.
Okay.
Yeah. See, Caravaggio was one of those artists. He was at the end, or what we call the high Renaissance, right? And then you know, some of the Spanish painters and things like that, you know, were again at the high Renaissance, and then it moved from the high Renaissance into what we call the Baroque period, which was really just, you know, after. But again, you know, where the Renaissance kind of stretched out over about 250 years, the Baroque, you know, depending on how you want to categorize artists and put them, you know, in various places, again, was about another 300-year period of time. And you're really talking, you know, with the Renaissance being from the 1300s to about the 1600s, you're looking at the Baroque, you know, starting, you know, really right around about the 1500s and going through about the 1800s, right? And so it spanned, you know, really an enormous amount of time, you know, in history. So it's, but, you know, when you start talking about the influences, and, you know, even when you get to the time of the Impressionists, right? You know, what were they rebelling against, right? They were rebelling against, you know, that traditional, you know, established style of art. And in France in particular, you know, that was still kind of right at the tail end of the Baroque, right? And so that's what they were really kind of up against. So anyhow, anybody really enjoy that?
Yeah.
Yes, very good.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Okay. You know, and the reason I like to share these things with you guys, you know, we can talk about techniques and everything else, but sometimes, you know, I think it's a really good idea as far as trying to understand a little bit about, you know, art history and about the history of painting and who some of these people were and the art that they created and why they created it. You know, what was life like, you know, for somebody like Peter Paul Rubens? And, you know, what kind of society did he live in? And that really drives, I think, in many ways, you know, the things that we as creative people respond to and make. So it's all about making art that's timely, you know, to the time that you live in. And Rubens was certainly one of those people who did that very well. Anyway, we're going to look at some,
that was lovely. I hope we do more of that type of thing. It was a different artist, but that was very helpful.
Mhm.
Very, 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 very supportive.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
we're going to be back at 2 o'clock. If you guys have paintings to submit that you want to talk about, please send some in. I have probably like maybe 20, okay, to go through. But a lot of you, you know, I haven't seen anything from you in a while. And so if you want to talk about something, if you want, you know, some feedback on some of the things you're working on, you know, send it to me, okay?
All right.
Anyway, we'll be back at 2, and you know, stay in and stay dry. It's raining over here. I don't know about, you know, all you
It's
folks.
raining. It's a rainy day in Georgia everywhere.
Yep. Okay. Anyway.
And a lot more to come.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it is getting into that time of year. All right. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. See you later.
Thank you again.